I was born with a curse in my throat. That's what the elders of my pack called it. This voice that came out too sweet, too haunting, too dangerous. A voice that didn't belong to an Omega, especially not a rejected one like me. The scent of pine needles crushed underfoot filled the air as I trudged through the forest path toward the great hall. Autumn's chill had settled into the valley, and the sunset painted the trees in hues of amber and crimson, like blood, like warning. My worn boots barely made a sound. I'd learned long ago how to move quietly, to exist on the periphery, to survive by being forgettable. Tonight was the Autumn Equinox Festival, the most important gathering of the year when all 5 packs of the Northern Territories would come together, including the Royal Pack, including him, Alpha King Alaric Blackthorn. My heart fluttered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I shouldn't have been invited. Rejected Omegas never were. But my sister Alara had become the pack's healer this year, and she'd insisted I attend as her assistant. "You've hidden long enough, Lyra," she'd said, pressing my grandmother's silver pendant into my palm that morning. The metal was worn smooth from years of nervous fingers. My grandmother's, then my mother's, now mine. The pendant felt heavy against my skin as I neared the great hall. Torches blazed outside the massive wooden structure, their flames dancing in the twilight, casting long shadows across the ground. Wolves in human form milled about in their finest clothes, laughing, touching, belonging. The air was thick with their mingled scents. Alpha, Beta, accepted Omega. All of them marked, all of them wanted. I clutched my grandmother's pendant. "A voice is power," she used to whisper to me before the rejection ceremony. "When everything else is taken, what remains in your throat can never be stolen." I hadn't understood then. Now, 6 years later, at 23, I understood too well. I paused at the edge of the clearing, my plain gray dress hanging loose on my frame. The mark of rejection, a crescent scar behind my right ear, seemed to burn as conversations died and heads turned in my direction. "What is she doing here?" someone whispered, loud enough for my enhanced hearing to catch. "Probably serving drinks," another replied with a snicker. I lowered my eyes, a reflex after years of conditioning. Rejected Omegas weren't supposed to make eye contact. We weren't supposed to speak unless spoken to. We weren't supposed to be seen at celebrations. "Lyra!" My sister's voice cut through the murmurs. Ilara appeared from the crowd, resplendent in her blue healer's robes, her dark hair braided with silver threads. Unlike me, she'd been blessed with our father's golden eyes and strong jaw, a perfect beta, useful, respected. She linked her arm through mine, her touch warm and secure. "You came." "You didn't give me much choice," I murmured, trying to ignore the stares boring into my back. "The Northern Alpha hasn't arrived yet," she said, pulling me toward the entrance. "But the other 4 packs are already inside. It's tense." It would be. The last time all 5 alphas had gathered, 2 years ago, there had been a challenge for territory that ended in bloodshed. The Northern Territories had been unstable ever since Alpha King Alaric had taken the throne after his father's mysterious death. Some said he was too young, too ruthless. Others said he wasn't ruthless enough. I'd never seen him in person. Rejected Omegas weren't permitted in royal gatherings, and he never visited our remote eastern pack. But I'd heard the stories of his cold demeanor, his tactical brilliance, his refusal to take a mate despite the political advantages it would bring. The great hall took my breath away. Hundreds of candles illuminated the massive space, their light reflecting off polished wood and stone. Long tables laden with food lined the walls, and the scent of roasted meat, fresh bread, and fermented berry wine made my mouth water. In the center, a large circular space remained empty, for dancing later, for challenges if they arose. Alara guided me to a small table near her station, where medicines and herbs were arranged should anyone need attention. "Stay here," she instructed. "Help me if I call, but otherwise, be invisible," I finished for her. "I know the rules, Alara," a pained expression crossed her face. "I just want you to be safe." Before she could say more, horns sounded at the entrance, and the hall fell silent. The Northern Pack had arrived. They entered like a dark tide, all dressed in black and silver, moving with the synchronized precision that made them the most feared warriors in all the territories. At their center walked a figure who could only be Alpha King Alaric Blackthorn. He wasn't what I expected. Taller than most, yes, but leaner than the brutish alphas I was used to seeing. His power wasn't in bulk, but in the deadly grace with which he moved, like a predator who never needed to rush. His hair was black as midnight, cut short on the sides but longer on top. And his eyes, even from a distance, I could see they were the color of storm clouds, gray and turbulent. A scar ran from his right temple down to his jawline, evidence of the challenge that had nearly cost him his throne last year. It should have marred his beauty, but somehow it only enhanced the dangerous aura surrounding him. "He's not wearing his crown," someone nearby whispered. "Bad omen," another replied. I shrank further into my corner as the festivities resumed. The Alpha King took his place at the high table alongside the other pack leaders, his expression unreadable as servants rushed to fill his goblet. I noticed he barely touched his food, his gaze constantly scanning the room as if searching for threats. The night progressed with formal exchanges between packs, announcements of births and deaths, agreements of trade and hunting grounds. I helped Alara tend to a young beta who'd drunk too much wine and an elderly omega who needed her pain tonic. No one spoke to me directly, which was a blessing. My voice, my curse, stayed safely locked away until the music began. First came the drums, primal and deep, resonating in my chest like a second heartbeat. Then flutes, their notes dancing and weaving through the air. Wolves began to pair off for the traditional dances, their movements fluid and sensual, a reminder of what I could never have, a mate, a place, belonging. I watched from the shadows as Alara was led to the dance floor by a handsome beta from the Western pack. She deserved happiness. She deserved everything I couldn't have. "You there, girl?" The voice made me jump. I turned to find Valerian Stone, beta commander of my own Eastern pack, looming over me. His breath reeked of wine and something fouler. Cruelty, perhaps. "You're the rejected one with the voice, aren't you?" My throat closed. I nodded, keeping my eyes down. "I've heard things about you," he slurred, leaning closer. "That before your rejection, you could sing so sweetly birds would fall silent. That it's why Alpha Thorn had you rejected. Feared you might enchant his son." I said nothing. The truth was more complicated, but it didn't matter now. "Sing for us," he said, his tone shifting from curious to commanding. I don't sing anymore," I whispered. His hand shot out, gripping my arm hard enough to bruise. "That wasn't a request. Rejected one." He raised his voice. "Hey, everyone, the Eastern Pack has brought their cursed Omega. Shouldn't she entertain us?" Conversations halted. Music faded. All eyes turned toward us, and I wanted nothing more than to dissolve into the floor beneath me. "Sing for us, rejected Omega," someone called, and laughter rippled through the crowd. "Yes, sing." Others joined in, the cruel game spreading like wildfire. I searched desperately for Alara, but she was trapped on the far side of the hall, her face a mask of horror as she tried to push through the crowd. Beta Valerian dragged me toward the center of the room, into the empty circle meant for honored dancers. Our Alpha rejected her because her voice is said to be too powerful, too bewitching, he announced, his words slightly slurred. "Shouldn't we judge for ourselves? Sing for us, rejected Omega. Show us this dangerous power." Tears burned in my eyes as wolves from all 5 packs gathered around, their expressions ranging from amusement to disgust to morbid curiosity. I clutched my grandmother's pendant, feeling the worn silver warm under my touch. A voice is power. When everything else is taken, what remains in your throat can never be stolen. "I said sing!" Valerian shook me, and the pendant slipped from my fingers, falling to the floor with a soft clink. As I bent to retrieve it, a hush fell over the hall. The air seemed to grow heavy, charged with a new energy. "What is happening here?" The voice was deep, quiet, and yet it cut through the hall like a blade. I looked up to see the crowd parting, and there stood Alpha King Alaric Blackthorn, his storm-gray eyes fixed on the scene before him. On me. "Your Majesty," Valerian stammered, immediately releasing my arm and bowing. just some entertainment. This rejected Omega did not consent to perform. The Alpha King finished for him, his tone dangerously soft. Or am I mistaken? Before Valerian could respond, Alaric's gaze shifted to me, and something inside me trembled, not with fear, but with something I couldn't name. Well? He asked, speaking directly to me as if I were a person worthy of address. Do you wish to sing for these wolves, Omega? The entire hall held its breath. No one spoke to rejected Omegas like this, as if our wishes mattered, as if we had choices. I should have said no, should have kept my curse locked away, safe behind my lips. Instead, I heard myself whisper, I will sing, but only one song. And the Alpha King's eyes widened just slightly, the first crack in his impassive mask. The silence that followed my response was deafening. A rejected Omega speaking directly to the Alpha King. It was unheard of. I could feel the shock rippling through the crowd, see the horror on some faces, the anticipation on others. In that moment, I realized there was no turning back. I had crossed a line simply by answering him. Alpha King Alaric didn't move, his storm-gray eyes studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. There was no anger in his gaze, only a sharp curiosity that felt more dangerous somehow. One song, he repeated, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. He stepped back, creating more space in the circle, then made a small gesture with his hand. Proceed. I bent down slowly to retrieve my grandmother's pendant, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares. My fingers trembled as I clutched the worn silver, drawing strength from its familiar contours. The hall remained utterly silent, waiting. What song could possibly matter in this moment? What melody could protect me from what would surely come after? Punishment for speaking out of turn, for drawing attention, for existing in a space where rejected Omegas should never be. I closed my eyes, remembering my grandmother's weathered face, the secret nights when she would teach me the old songs from before the pack wars, before Omegas were classified as worthy or unworthy. The moon sees what the sun does not, she used to say. And sometimes, Lyra, the darkness is where true power awakens. My grandmother had been rejected too, though no one ever spoke of why. She had lived alone at the edge of the territory, tolerated only because of her knowledge of healing plants. It was there, in her tiny cabin smelling of dried herbs and pine smoke, that I had first discovered what my voice could do. I took a deep breath, letting the scents of the hall fill my lungs. Wood smoke, wine, fear, curiosity. And then, I sang. The first note was soft, a mere whisper of sound that nonetheless carried to every corner of the vast hall. It was an ancient lullaby, one sung by mothers to children during the long winter nights when hunger and cold threatened to consume the weaker pack members. Sleep, little wolf, beneath the silver moon. The stars keep watch till morning comes too soon. Though shadows gather and the night grows deep, the pack surrounds you in your sleep. My voice grew stronger with each word, and I felt something unfurling inside me. Something I had kept tightly bound for 6 long years, a power, warm and electric, flowing from my core into my throat, into the air around me. The forest holds its secrets in the dark. The ancient trees stand silent, grim and stark. But you are safe within these loving arms, protected from all worldly harms. I opened my eyes as I began the 3rd verse, and what I saw almost made me stumble over the words. The wolves around me stood transfixed, their expressions slack, pupils dilated. Some swayed slightly with the melody, others remained perfectly still, barely breathing. Even Beta Valerian, who moments ago had gripped my arm with cruel fingers, now stared at me with parted lips and glassy eyes. But it was the Alpha King who captured my attention completely. Alaric Blackthorn, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories, regarded me with an expression I had never seen directed at me before. Wonder. The hard lines of his face had softened, the perpetual vigilance in his posture momentarily forgotten. His storm-gray eyes were wide, focused entirely on me as if nothing else in the room existed. The sight gave me courage, and as I sang the final verse, I allowed my voice to carry all the loneliness, all the yearning, all the silent rage I had swallowed for years. When dawn breaks over mountain tall, and shadows flee the sun's bright call, remember this, my precious one. Your strength lies in what can't be won. Through winter's bite and summer's heat, through triumph's joy and harsh defeat, the lone wolf dies, the pack survives, but true power comes from inside. The last note hung in the air, crystal clear and haunting. For several heartbeats after I finished, not a single person moved or spoke. It was as if time itself had paused, caught in the spell of my voice. Then, like waking from a collective dream, the hall seemed to inhale. Wolves blinked, shook their heads slightly, glanced at each other in confusion or amazement. Some looked frightened, others appeared strangely moved, wiping at eyes suddenly damp with tears. Alpha King Alaric was the first to recover, straightening his shoulders and clearing his throat. The mask of cool detachment slid back into place, but not before I caught a flash of something in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or realization. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice lower than before, rougher around the edges. Again, the hall held its collective breath. He was addressing me directly a second time, breaking protocol, crossing boundaries. "Lyra," I answered, my own voice barely more than a whisper now. "Lyra Moonshade of the Eastern Pack." "Lyra Moonshade," he repeated, and hearing my name on his lips sent an unexpected warmth cascading through me. That was most impressive. A murmur swept through the crowd. Impressive? A rejected Omega? Before anyone could react further, the doors to the great hall burst open with a thunderous bang. A warrior from the northern pack staggered in, blood seeping from a wound at his temple, his clothes torn and dirty. "Your Majesty!" he gasped, falling to one knee before Alaric. "We're under attack. Southern rogues. At least 30. They've breached the outer perimeter." The peaceful atmosphere shattered instantly. Alaric's expression hardened as he barked orders, his voice now carrying the unmistakable command of an alpha. "Warriors to arms, civilians to the inner chambers." Now, chaos erupted as wolves rushed to follow his commands. Warriors from all 5 packs moved toward the doors, shifting forms even as they ran. Mothers gathered children. Elders were quickly escorted toward the back of the hall where hidden tunnels led to safer quarters. In the confusion, I found myself pushed and jostled, forgotten once more. I searched desperately for Alara, catching glimpses of her blue healer's robes as she moved quickly to gather her medicines. A hand gripped my arm, and I turned, expecting Alara, only to find myself staring into the cold eyes of Beta Valerian. "What did you do?" he hissed, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. "That wasn't natural. The way they all looked at you, the way he looked at you. I just sang," I whispered, trying to pull away. "Please, I need to find my sister." "You bewitched them," he snarled, dragging me sideways, away from the main rush of people. "You bewitched the Alpha King himself. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? What happens to Omegas who draw too much attention?" I did know. Rejection was considered merciful compared to the alternatives. "Let me go," I said, struggling against his grip, but he was too strong, pulling me toward a side door that led to the kitchens. "Alpha Thorn was right to reject you," Valerian muttered. But he should have done more. A voice like that is a threat to the entire pack structure, to the hierarchy that keeps us all safe. A cold dread settled in my stomach. The kitchens would be empty now, everyone having fled to the safe rooms. No one would hear me scream. As if reading my thoughts, Valerian smiled, a cruel twist of lips. "Don't worry, little Omega. I'm not going to kill you. But by the time I'm done, you won't be using that voice to enchant anyone ever again." Terror gave me strength. I twisted violently in his grip and managed to break free, but as I turned to run, I collided with a solid wall of muscle and warmth. Strong hands steadied me, and I looked up into the face of Alpha King Alaric Blackthorn. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm, though I could feel tension radiating from him like heat from a fire. Valerian immediately dropped into a submissive posture, head bowed. "No problem, Your Majesty. Just ensuring the rejected Omega returns to her proper place." "Her proper place," Alaric repeated slowly, his eyes never leaving Valerian's face. "And where might that be, Beta Valerian?" Since when does the Eastern Pact's second-in-command concern himself with the whereabouts of a single Omega during an attack? Something dangerous flashed in Alaric's eyes, a glimpse of the wolf beneath the man, predatory and fierce. Valerian swallowed hard. I was following Alpha Thorn's standing orders regarding this particular Omega. She's unstable. Dangerous, even. Is she? Alaric's voice had dropped to nearly a whisper, but the threat in it was unmistakable. His hand remained on my arm, not restraining like Valerian's had been, but steady, almost protective. Strange. She seems perfectly stable to me, and the only danger I've witnessed tonight came from your manhandling of a pack member under my protection. Under his protection? I stared up at him, confused. Rejected Omegas belong to no one, were protected by no one. Your Majesty, Valerian began, a hint of desperation creeping into his voice. You don't understand. This Omega was rejected for good reason. Her voice, Alaric cut him off, is remarkable, and right now, I require it. Return to your Alpha, Beta Valerian. Tell him the Northern Pack has taken temporary custody of Lyra Moonshade for her own safety during this attack. Valerian's face drained of color. But that was not a suggestion. Alaric's words were soft, but landed like physical blows. The power of an Alpha King, the most dominant wolf in all 5 territories, rolled off him in waves, forcing Valerian to take a step back. Yes, Your Majesty, Valerian managed through gritted teeth, before turning and disappearing into the crowd. Alaric's attention shifted to me, and I found myself unable to look away from his intense gaze. Up close, his eyes weren't simply gray. They contained flecks of silver and midnight blue, like a sky caught between storm and stars. Are you harmed? He asked, his voice gentler than I would have expected from an Alpha, especially one with his reputation. I shook my head, still too stunned to speak. A thunderous crash echoed from somewhere outside the hall, followed by snarls and the unmistakable sounds of combat. We don't have much time, he said, glancing toward the main doors where his warriors were engaged in battle. Come with me. It wasn't a request. Despite his gentle tone, I recognized the command of an Alpha, a command no wolf, especially an Omega, could easily resist. My sister, I managed, finding my voice at last. Ilara, the Eastern Pact's healer. I can't leave her. Something like respect flickered across his face. Your sister will be safe in the healer's quarters. They're well protected. He paused, studying me with that penetrating gaze. But you won't be safe anywhere in this hall. Not after what just happened. Because I sang? I asked, confused. A corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Because of how we all reacted when you sang. His expression darkened. Valerian was right about one thing. Drawing that kind of attention is dangerous for someone in your position. Before I could respond, another crash sounded, closer this time. Alaric's head snapped toward the noise, his entire body tensing. We need to move. Now. His hand slid down to grasp mine, and the contact sent a jolt of electricity up my arm. Trust me, Lyra Moonshade. Please. The please caught me off guard. Alphas never said please, especially not to rejected Omegas. And yet here was the Alpha King himself, holding my hand and asking, not commanding, for my trust. In that moment, with chaos erupting around us, and the memory of Valerian's threat still fresh, I made my choice. I nodded. And Alaric Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, pulled me through the crowd toward a hidden door behind the high table, his hand warm and firm around mine. While behind us, the great hall descended into the fury of battle. The passage behind the high table was narrow and dimly lit, smelling of stone dust and old secrets. Alaric moved with the confidence of someone who had walked these hidden corridors many times, his broad shoulders nearly brushing both walls as he led me deeper into the mountain. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a question I couldn't voice. Why me? Why now? What did he want? Behind us, the sounds of battle grew fainter. snarls and howls muffled by layers of ancient stone. I should have been afraid, following the most powerful and unpredictable alpha in the territories into the unknown, yet somehow, the warm pressure of his hand around mine felt more like safety than threat. "Watch your step here," he murmured, his deep voice reverberating in the confined space. A faint blue light emanated from crystals embedded in the ceiling, casting eerie shadows across his sharp features. The floor dropped suddenly. I nodded, though he couldn't see me in the near darkness, and carefully navigated the uneven steps. The pendant around my neck seemed to grow heavier with each step, as if my grandmother's spirit was trying to warn me, or guide me. After what felt like an eternity of twisting passages and steep stairs, we emerged into a circular chamber that took my breath away. Unlike the rough-hewn tunnel, this room was finished with polished stone that gleamed in the light of dozens of candles. Bookshelves lined the walls, packed with ancient tomes and scrolls. A massive desk carved from a single piece of oak dominated one side, covered with maps and documents. On the other side, a hearth crackled with welcoming warmth, flanked by 2 plush chairs that looked bizarrely comfortable in this hidden fortress. "The King's Sanctuary," Alaric said, finally releasing my hand as the heavy door swung shut behind us. "No one enters without my permission. You'll be safe here." Safe. The word felt foreign on my tongue, a concept I'd forgotten long ago. Rejected Omegas were never truly safe. Why? The question escaped before I could stop it. I immediately dropped my gaze to the floor, an instinctive submission after years of conditioning. "I mean, forgive me, Your Majesty, but why would you bring me here? I'm just a rejected Omega with a voice that stopped the hearts of every wolf in that hall," he finished, moving toward a cabinet near the hearth. A voice that even now echoes in my mind like a spell. He withdrew 2 goblets and a crystal decanter filled with amber liquid. "You are many things, Lyra Moonshade, but just is not one of them." Heat crept up my neck at his words. No one had spoken to me this way since before my rejection. No one had seen me as anything but shameful, burdensome, invisible. "Here." He extended one of the goblets toward me. "Highland whiskey. The situation seems to call for it." I hesitated before accepting the drink, our fingers brushing momentarily. Another jolt of that strange electricity passed between us, and his eyes widened slightly, confirming he'd felt it too. "Thank you," I murmured, taking a cautious sip. The whiskey burned a path down my throat, warming me from the inside. For the drink and for intervening with Beta Valerian. Alaric's expression darkened at the mention of Valerian's name. "That man has always been too interested in enforcing hierarchies, especially against those who cannot easily defend themselves." He moved to stand before the fire, the flames casting his profile in gold and shadow. "Tell me, Lyra, why were you rejected by your pack?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. A direct question from the Alpha King couldn't be evaded, even if the answer exposed vulnerabilities I'd spent years trying to hide. I took another sip of whiskey for courage. Officially, I was rejected for refusing to mate with Alpha Thorn's nephew. The words tasted bitter, memories rising like bile. I was 17. The nephew was 35 and had already broken 2 previous mates through excessive discipline. Alaric's knuckles whitened around his goblet. And, unofficially, I met his gaze then, refusing to flinch from the intensity I found there. Unofficially, it was my voice. As a child, I used to sing all the time. People would react. They would stop whatever they were doing to listen. Some would cry without knowing why. Others would seem almost hypnotized. I swallowed hard. Alpha Thorn said it was unnatural, dangerous, that no Omega should have that kind of influence, especially over alphas and betas. "So he rejected you to neutralize the threat," Alaric concluded, his voice carefully controlled. "By making you an outcast, he ensured no one would hear you sing again." I nodded. Rejected Omegas aren't permitted to perform or entertain. We exist to serve in the most menial capacities, to be useful without being seen or heard. The familiar ache of loneliness swelled in my chest. For 6 years, I've only sung in secret, when I was completely alone, until tonight. There was something like admiration in his tone. "Until tonight," I agreed. I don't know why I agreed to sing. It was foolish. Now Alpha Thorn will have even more reason to... I stopped, suddenly remembering the battle still raging outside these walls. The attack. Shouldn't you be with your warriors? Your pack needs you. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My second is more than capable of handling a band of southern rogues. This isn't their first attempt, merely their most brazen. He set his goblet down and moved closer to me, close enough that I could catch his scent, pine and snow and something wilder, something purely alpha. And sometimes a king must prioritize. Right now you are my priority, Lyra Moonshade. My pulse quickened. Why? Because in 6 years of ruling these territories, navigating political alliances and surviving 3 direct challenges to my throne, I have never, not once, encountered something that affected me the way your voice did tonight. His admission seemed to cost him, his jaw tightening as if he'd revealed more than he intended. I didn't know how to respond. The intensity of his gaze made it difficult to think clearly. Your grandmother's pendant, he said suddenly, nodding toward the silver at my throat. May I? Another strange request from this most unusual alpha. I nodded, and he stepped closer, gently lifting the pendant from where it rested against my collarbone. His fingers were warm against my skin, and I forced myself to breathe normally despite his proximity. The crescent moon and 3 stars, he murmured, studying the worn silver. This is an ancient symbol. Do you know what it represents? I shook my head. My grandmother only said it had been passed down through her family for generations, that it would protect me when I needed it most. Alaric's eyes met mine, serious and searching. It's the emblem of the Moon Singers, a line of Omegas said to possess voices that could heal minds, command wills, even predict the future. They served as advisors to the first Wolf Kings, before the territories were divided, before Omegas were... He paused, something like regret crossing his features. Before Omegas were classified and controlled. My mouth went dry. That's just a legend, a bedtime story. Is it? He released the pendant but didn't step back. Legends often contain more truth than history, Lyra. History is written by those in power, while legends are whispered by those who remember. A distant howl penetrated even these thick walls, the call of an alpha in battle. Alaric's head turned sharply toward the sound, his body tensing. That's Raoul, the Western Alpha, he said, frowning. The rogues shouldn't have gotten that far into our defenses. Maybe it's not just rogues, I suggested quietly. Maybe it's a distraction. His eyes snapped back to mine, sharp with sudden interest. What makes you say that? I hesitated, unsure why I'd spoken the thought aloud. It just feels wrong. Southern rogues have never attacked during a major festival before. They know all 5 packs are gathered, with their strongest warriors. Why would they choose tonight, unless someone inside wanted chaos? Alaric finished, his expression darkening. Someone who knew the Alpha King would be distracted. A chill ran down my spine. By what? The look he gave me answered my question before his words did. By you, Lyra. By a moon singer appearing after generations of silence, just when the territories are at their most unstable. The implications made my head spin. That's impossible. I'm nobody. A rejected Omega. I've lived my entire life in the Eastern Territory, barely tolerated, completely powerless. Have you? He challenged. Or have you been hidden, protected, even in rejection? He began to pace, his movements controlled but energetic. Think about it. Your grandmother taught you the old songs in secret. Your sister ensured you were present tonight, despite tradition. Even your rejection, painful as it was, kept you on the fringes rather than destroyed. He stopped, turning to face me fully. What if it was all deliberate? What if someone has been waiting for the right moment to reveal you? My leg suddenly felt weak, and I sank into one of the chairs by the fire. You're suggesting some kind of conspiracy? Around me? The idea was so absurd, I almost laughed. For what purpose? Alaric knelt before me, his eyes level with mine, all pretense of alpha detachment gone. The Northern Territories haven't been truly united in over a century. The 5 packs maintain an uneasy peace, but the old alliances are fraying, My father's death 3 years ago left a power vacuum that I, his too young, untested son, have struggled to fill. A vulnerability showed in his expression that I suspected few had ever witnessed. The Moon Singers were said to have one power above all others. They could make wolves see beyond pack divisions to our common bonds. They could unite us. And you think I'm one of these? Moon Singers, I whispered, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. I think you're something I've never encountered before, he answered honestly, and I think others may have recognized it long before I did. Another howl pierced the night, closer this time, followed by the unmistakable sounds of conflict. Snarls, the crash of breaking furniture, the thud of bodies hitting stone. Alaric rose to his feet in one fluid motion. They're inside the great hall again. I need to go. He moved to a cabinet on the far wall and withdrew a gleaming silver dagger, which he offered to me hilt first. Stay here. The door locks from the inside and is reinforced with steel. No one can enter without the key. He withdrew a heavy iron key from inside his jacket. Take this. Use it only if you must leave. The passage to your right leads to the eastern forest edge. I accepted both dagger and key with trembling hands. What about you? I'll return when it's safe. He moved toward the door, then paused, turning back with an expression I couldn't quite read. Lyra, when you sang tonight, did you intend to affect us as you did? The question caught me off guard. No, I answered truthfully. I've never intentionally tried to influence anyone with my voice. I just sing what I feel. He nodded, as if my answer confirmed something important. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful magic of all. Before I could respond, he added, if I don't return by dawn, use the key. Find your sister and leave the territory. Go north, beyond the mountains. There are wolves there who remember the old ways, who would protect a moon singer. With those ominous words, he was gone, the heavy door closing behind him with a resounding thud. Alone in the king's sanctuary, I clutched the dagger to my chest, my mind reeling. Moonsinger, conspiracy, magic. The words circled like hungry wolves, too fantastic to believe yet too specific to dismiss. I moved to the bookshelves, scanning titles by the candlelight. Many were written in ancient script I couldn't read, but others were in the common tongue. One slim volume bound in faded blue leather caught my eye. Histories of the First Pack. I pulled it from the shelf with careful fingers and opened it to a page marked with a pressed moonflower, a rare bloom that only opened under the full moon. The illustration on the page stole my breath. A woman stood upon a stone dais, wolves in human form kneeling before her. From her open mouth emanated silver spirals that touched each listener. Around her neck hung a pendant identical to my grandmother's, the crescent moon and 3 stars. Beneath the illustration, faded script read, The last moon singer, Ariella Moonshade, advisor to King Alaric I, foretells the great divide before entering the eternal sleep. Moonshade, my family name. King Alaric, the same name as the current Alpha King. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the book. This couldn't be coincidence. My grandmother had never spoken of our family's distant past, only that we had old blood. Could it be possible? Was I somehow connected to these legendary moon singers? A sudden crash against the door made me jump, the book tumbling from my hands. I froze, listening intently as another thud shook the heavy wood. I know you're in there, rejected one. Beta Valerian's voice, slurred with either drink or bloodlust. Open this door, or I'll break it down. Fear clutched at my throat. How had he found this place? How did he know I was here? The Alpha King left you, didn't he? Valerian called through the door. Gone to fight while you cower in his private chambers. What an honor for a rejected Omega. Did he take you first? Is that why he was so protective? His crude implications made my cheeks burn with anger rather than shame. Alaric had been nothing but respectful, treating me with more dignity than I'd known in years. Alpha Thorn wants you brought back, little songbird, Valerian continued, his voice dropping to a menacing purr. Dead or alive, it makes no difference to him. Your voice has become too dangerous to ignore. I gripped the dagger tighter, backing away from the door. The Alpha King ordered me to stay here, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. He'll return soon. Valerian's laugh held no humor. The Alpha King is otherwise engaged. Southern rogues in the Great Hall, northern challengers in the courtyard. It's quite the coordinated attack, almost as if someone planned it all to coincide with your little performance. My blood ran cold. Alaric had been right. The attack was a distraction, but not to get to him. To get to me. Why does Alpha Thorn want me dead? I demanded, a new courage flowing through me. What is he afraid of? Another heavy thud against the door, the wood groaning under the assault. He's afraid of what you represent, Moonsinger. The old powers returning, the hierarchy crumbling. A splintering sound indicated the door was beginning to give way. The Eastern Pack has controlled your bloodline for generations, keeping you weak, hidden, but useful. Your grandmother was too old, too cautious. But you've shown your power now. There's no putting that back in the cage. My mind raced, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. My rejection hadn't been punishment. It had been containment, keeping me isolated, powerless, dependent. And now that I'd revealed my voice publicly, that containment had failed. I glanced at the passage Alaric had indicated. My escape route. I could flee now, before Valerian broke through. But to where? To do what? Run forever, always looking over my shoulder. A voice is power. When everything else is taken, what remains in your throat can never be stolen. My grandmother's words echoed in my mind, and suddenly I understood. She hadn't been offering comfort to a rejected Omega. She had been reminding me of my inheritance, my birthright. The door cracked, a splinter of wood flying inward. Valerian's eye appeared at the gap, wild with hatred. I had one chance, one power that had never been taken from me. I closed my eyes, drew a deep breath, and began to sing. Not the gentle lullaby from earlier, but something older. Something that rose from deep within me. A melody I'd never heard before, yet somehow knew by heart. The words came in the ancient tongue, their meaning unclear to my conscious mind, yet perfectly understood by something deeper, more primal. Through the cracking door, I heard Valerian cry out, first in rage, then in what sounded like pain. The assault on the door stopped, then came a heavy thud, as if a body had fallen to the floor. Still singing, I moved closer to the door, peering through the splintered gap. Valerian lay sprawled on the stone floor of the passage, unconscious, or perhaps worse. My voice had done that, had reached out and struck him down without my even touching him. The knowledge should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with a strange, calm certainty. This was who I was, who I had always been, a Moonsinger awakened. I stood frozen for several heartbeats, staring at Valerian's motionless form through the splintered door. My song had faded, but its echoes seemed to linger in the air around me, charged with power I'd never consciously wielded before. The pendant at my throat felt warm against my skin, almost alive with energy. What had I done? Was he dead? The thought sent a wave of nausea through me. I might have hated Valerian, feared him even, but I had never wanted to kill. Drawing a shaky breath, I unlocked the door with trembling fingers and pushed it open just enough to kneel beside his body. Relief flooded me when I saw his chest rising and falling, unconscious then, not dead. His face looked peaceful, almost childlike in repose, the habitual cruelty erased from his features. A distant crash, followed by shouts, reminded me of the larger battle still raging through the Great Hall. Alaric was out there, fighting to protect his pack, his territory. Fighting while a conspiracy unfolded around him, around us. I had two choices: flee through the escape passage as Alaric had instructed, or return to the Great Hall and use the only weapon I possessed. My voice. The rejected Omega I had been for 6 years would have chosen safety and anonymity, but that woman was falling away from me like an outgrown skin, revealing something older, stronger beneath. Decision made. I stepped over Valerian's prone form and moved swiftly through the passageway, retracing our earlier steps. The dagger Alaric had given me was tucked into my belt, but I knew it wouldn't be my primary defense. My hand reached up to touch the pendant, my grandmother's pendant, my birthright, drawing courage from its solid presence. As I neared the hidden entrance to the Great Hall, the sounds of battle grew louder, snarls, screams, the distinct crack of bones breaking. I paused, heart hammering against my ribs. What was I doing? I wasn't a warrior. I had no fighting skills, no physical strength to match the wolves who had trained their entire lives for combat. All I had was my voice. A voice is power. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the concealed door and stepped into chaos. The great hall had become a battlefield. Tables lay overturned, food and wine spilled across the floor, mixing with darker, redder stains. Wolves fought in both human and shifted forms, some fully transformed into massive beasts, others in the terrifying half-state that combined human intelligence with lupine strength and ferocity. My eyes searched frantically for Alaric among the combatants. At first, I couldn't distinguish friend from foe in the melee, but then I spotted him. A black wolf larger than any I'd ever seen, fighting back-to-back with a gray wolf I recognized as the Western Alpha. They were surrounded by at least 8 attackers, some wearing the colors of the Southern Rogues, others unmarked. Without conscious thought, I began to move toward them, dodging between skirmishes, pressing myself against walls to avoid notice. A small voice in the back of my mind screamed that this was madness, that I was walking into certain death, but a stronger certainty propelled me forward. I had almost reached the center of the hall when a rough hand seized my arm, spinning me around. I found myself face to face with Alpha Thorn of the Eastern Pack. My pack, the man who had rejected me, who apparently had been monitoring my family for generations. "You!" he snarled, his eyes flashing amber with barely contained wolf. "I should have had you killed years ago, but your grandmother begged for mercy. Said you'd never manifest the power if kept isolated." His lips curled in a cruel smile. She was wrong. I tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. "Why?" I demanded, finding courage in anger. "Why control my family? What are you so afraid of?" "Balance." He spat the word like a curse. The moon singers threatened the natural order. Omegas advising kings, influencing alphas with their voices, undermining the hierarchy that keeps us strong. His free hand moved to my throat, fingers pressing against my windpipe. "The Eastern Pack has kept your bloodline contained for centuries, breeding it weaker with each generation. You should have been the weakest yet, but somehow..." His grip tightened, cutting off my words, my breath, my power. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as I clawed desperately at his hand. "Your voice dies with you," he growled. "The old ways remain buried. The packs remain divided and controllable." My lungs burned for air. The pendant seemed to pulse against my skin, urging me to fight, to survive, to become what I was meant to be. With the last of my strength, I drove my knee upward, catching Alpha Thorn in the groin. His grip loosened just enough for me to wrench free, stumbling backward, dragging precious air into my starved lungs. "You dare?" he snarled, advancing on me, his body beginning to shift, bones cracking as his form elongated. I straightened, one hand pressed to my bruised throat, the other clutching my grandmother's pendant. No more running, no more hiding. "I dare," I rasped, and then I began to sing. This song was different from any I'd sung before. Not a lullaby, not the ancient power that had felled Valerian, but something new, something born of this moment, this danger, this awakening. It rose from deep within me, raw and primal, a calling to every wolf present. Hear me. Children of moon and forest, blood of the first pack, divided too long. Remember the bonds that transcend territory. Remember the strength that comes from belonging. Alpha Thorn lunged toward me, but his movement slowed mid-leap, as if he were pushing through thick honey. Around us, the fighting began to falter as wolves turned toward the sound of my voice, their expressions shifting from rage to confusion. 5 fingers of one hand, 5 streams of one river, 5 paths that lead back to a single source. The enemy is not each other but division itself. Turn your teeth from your brothers. Unite against the true threat. My voice grew stronger with each word, filling the vast hall, reaching into every corner, every shadow. Wolves on both sides lowered their weapons, their claws, their fangs. Some sank to their knees. Others stood transfixed. Alpha Thorn remained frozen before me, his face contorted in a rictus of hatred and fear. Through the crowd, a path cleared, and Alaric appeared, shifted back to human form, bleeding from a gash across his chest, but standing tall and regal. His storm-gray eyes locked with mine, filled with wonder and something deeper, something that made my heart stutter in its rhythm. "Lyra," he said, my name a caress on his lips. I didn't break my song, but I extended my hand toward him, and he moved forward as if drawn by an invisible thread, taking it in his own. The moment our skin touched, a surge of energy passed between us, amplifying my voice, transforming it into something more powerful than either of us alone. Together, we turned to face Alpha Thorn, who had collapsed to his knees, his shift receding, leaving him looking smaller, older, defeated. "It's over, Thorn," Alaric said, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of the Alpha King. "The conspiracy ends tonight. The Eastern Pack will be placed under new leadership, and the Moonsinger's bloodline will be restored to its rightful place in our society." "You fool," Thorn gasped, glaring up at Alaric. "She'll destroy everything. The hierarchy, the traditions, your own power. Perhaps some traditions need to end." Alaric replied calmly. "Perhaps some power should be shared rather than hoarded." His hand tightened around mine. "The territories have been divided too long. 5 packs fighting over scraps, while greater threats gather beyond our borders." Around us, the hall had grown completely silent. Every wolf, whether warrior, civilian, eastern, western, northern, southern, or forest, watching and listening with rapt attention. "The Moonsingers didn't threaten the Alpha Kings of old," Alaric continued, addressing not just Thorn but all present. "They complemented them. Together, voice and fang, wisdom and strength, they created the greatest era of peace and prosperity our kind has ever known." He turned to look at me, his expression open, vulnerable. History repeats itself, if we're wise enough to let it. My song had faded to a gentle hum, but its effect remained. Across the hall, wolves from different packs were helping each other up, tending to wounds, sharing water. The invisible barriers that had kept us separate for so long seemed to have thinned, if not disappeared entirely. Alpha Thorn was seized by warriors from the northern pack, his hands bound behind his back. "This isn't over," he snarled as they dragged him away. "The other alphas won't accept this. An Omega with power, they'll never allow it." "They already have," came a voice from behind us. I turned to see the Western Alpha approaching, his silver hair matted with blood, but his eyes clear and determined. I, Raoul of the Western Pack, recognized the Moonsinger and pledged my pack's alliance to the Northern Throne. One by one, the remaining alphas stepped forward, the stern female alpha of the Southern Pack, still in half shift with claws extended, the ancient wise-eyed alpha of the Forest Pack, leaning on a gnarled staff. Each acknowledged me, pledged to Alaric, united in a way that hadn't been seen in generations. Throughout it all, Alaric never released my hand, his touch a constant anchor in the storm of changes swirling around me. As the wounded were tended to and the dead honored, as prisoners were secured and alliances formalized, he led me away from the center of attention, finding a quiet alcove where we could speak privately. "You came back," he said, his voice low and intense. "I told you to flee if there was danger. Yet you returned to the battle. Why?" I met his gaze steadily, no longer afraid to look an alpha in the eyes. "Because running would never have ended. Because I finally understood what my grandmother had been preparing me for all along. Because..." I hesitated, then added softly, "because I couldn't leave you to face this alone." Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, vulnerability, hope. "When you sang," he said, "it was like hearing a voice I'd been waiting for my entire life without knowing it, like finding the missing piece to a puzzle I'd been trying to solve since taking the throne." His hand moved to cup my cheek, his touch gentle despite the strength I knew he possessed. "The legends say the first Alpha King and the first Moonsinger were bound not just by duty but by something deeper, something unbreakable." My heart thundered in my chest. "And do you believe in legends, Alpha King?" A smile, the first true smile I'd seen from him, transformed his face, softening the hard edges, lighting his storm-gray eyes from within. "I believe in what I've witnessed tonight. I believe in the power of your voice. I believe in what I feel when I'm near you. Something I've never felt before, something that defies every rule and tradition I was raised to uphold." He moved closer, his scent enveloping me, pine and snow and alpha, but also something uniquely Alaric, something that called to the deepest part of me, the rejected Omega and the Alpha King. I whispered, marveling at the impossibility of it all. No, he corrected gently. The Moon Singer and the Alpha King, as it was always meant to be. His forehead rested against mine, our breath mingling. Stay, Lyra. Help me unite the packs, help me rebuild what was broken centuries ago. Be my advisor, my conscience, He trailed off, but I understood what he couldn't yet say. Some bonds formed too quickly to be named, too deeply to be denied. I'll stay, I promised, the words feeling like a vow, like destiny itself. When his lips finally met mine, it was gentle yet fierce, tender yet claiming. The pendant at my throat grew warm between us, as if blessing this union, this completion of a circle broken long ago. In that moment, I was no longer the rejected Omega, no longer the invisible girl who moved through life without leaving footprints. I was Lyra Moonshade, last of an ancient line, first of a new beginning. The curse in my throat had become a gift. The rejection that defined me had become the path to my true purpose. And Alaric Blackthorn, the Alpha King with storm in his eyes and strength in his hands, had become something I never thought possible for someone like me. Home, as we returned to the Great Hall, hand in hand. Alpha and Omega, King and Singer. The gathered wolves fell silent, then one by one, they knelt. Not in submission, but in recognition. Recognition of something old made new again. Something broken made whole. Sing for us, Alaric whispered, his eyes never leaving mine. Sing for all of us, and so I did. My voice rising clear and true in the dawn light now streaming through the high windows, healing the wounds of centuries, binding the packs as one, weaving a future from the threads of a forgotten past. This time, when the Alpha King fell under the spell of my voice, he did so willingly, proudly, his heart given freely to the Omega, who had been rejected only to find her true power, the power to unite, to heal, to love, to sing for him, and him alone.